Ding dong, the witch is dead. The WGA is headed back to the negotiating table on Friday. Or is the witch dead? Well, we're going to talk about that today. Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. And I'm returning to that old well of content creation bit. I'm returning to the SAG strike. Now, I talked about the SAG strike yesterday, and of course, almost immediately, my dear friend texted me a link to a podcast he had heard, which was very interesting to listen to. We'll get to that in a moment. But an update for those of you who listen to this page and don't follow news updates, because I don't know why you would listen to news about this, but the WGA and the AMPTP, say that 6 times fast, are returning to the negotiating table, which is phenomenal. It's good news all around when two entities that should be negotiating with each other return to negotiating with each other. And good Lord, I see myself in the camera right now, and I look like a hobo. I gotta get a haircut. That's a point for another day. Moving on. It's late. It's 9:40 on the West Coast. For me, that's late. And we need to get this done. Anyways, the WGA, the Writers Guild, is returning to the negotiating table with the AMPTP, which, as we've talked about before, is the trade, not the trade union, it's a trade group, a trade conglomerate of studios, of the major studios, Disney, Apple, Warner Brothers, NBC, Universal, blah, 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 blah. They're returning to the negotiating table, which is good news. That is very good news, because the only way a deal can get done is at the negotiating table. Now, my fellow picketers, and I've been out there on the lines with you, you do need to know that picketing is a great way to show solidarity. It is an excellent way to talk to people. It is an excellent way to be in community with your fellow actors and writers. It is a terrible way to negotiate. It is a terrible way to negotiate, but it's a terrible way to negotiate because you're not negotiating. Negotiating requires a conversation. And that was, transition incoming, that was the point being raised by this podcast I listened to today. Now, I do not know the 4 gentlemen who are on this podcast from Adam, as the old saying goes. I don't know them personally. I don't know them professionally. They seemed to have they seemed to be very knowledgeable about technology updates and about economic discussions in general. They were very well-spoken, verbose, as some might say. But the main thrust of the part of the podcast that I listened to that had to do with Hollywood was that actors and writers are striking themselves out of a job. Now, before anybody comes after me for saying that, I disagree. Unions' power exists in their membership, just as the employer's power exists in their ability to employ. Unions were designed to offset the inherent imbalance between a corporation and an individual. Now, don't get me wrong, incredibly savvy individuals can, outside of a union setting, negotiate good wages for themselves and negotiate very good lives for themselves. But the problem is, for the majority of people, there is an inherent disparity in bargaining power. So unions, the way they make up for that disparity is they gather workers together and collectively bargain, hence the term collective bargaining agreement. And the SAG deal is just that. It's a collective bargaining agreement. You sports fans listening to the podcast are more familiar with that than others. For actors, it's just a deal that's collectively bargained for. That's it. Now, their point was that the strike is demonstrating how expensive actors and writers are to studios and why they should make the transition to AI. AI technologies allowing them to create personalized programs and just generate scripts at the drop of a hat. Okay, here is the problem. AI is an excellent search tool. It is in fact such a good search tool that a lawsuit has been brought against AI companies for infringement of copyright because AI searches everything that exists on a database, on a publicly accessible database, including the copyright libraries. But AI does not have the inherent wherewithal to properly cite or to automatically generate licenses. In fact, it is a complete erasure of licensing. It is a complete. I said complete. I shouldn't make the joke that follows it, and I won't. I'm better than that. AI is an erasure of about 200 years of U.S. intellectual property right law because it violates it so quickly and so cleverly that it becomes difficult to enforce it unless you enforce it now before the AI becomes the Terminator. And just because my hair is crazy doesn't mean that I'm saying that as like a, I'm not saying that as a tinfoil conspiracy theorist. In its best case scenario and in its best use, AI is an excellent research and optimization tool. AI would be great if you programmed AI with, say, grammar rules. AI would be excellent at taking a run through a script and looking for edits, taking away those little small wastes of time where you have to go through and be like, oh my God, is this spelled right? Did they spell, all the miscommonly spelled words correctly? And it could build a database based on that. You would end up with a tool that would be really helpful to writers. AI will never have a heart. AI will always be mimicry. It will always copy something else. And people who don't understand TV writing and TV acting and movie writing and movie acting will say, well, aren't all the stories that aren't all stories basically then told? Yes. But we look for the wrinkles and the new ways the stories are told. All stories are almost exactly the same. Every hero story has been the same since the Bible was written. And just because I believe in the Bible does not mean I also don't recognize that it is the original hero story. A hero rises, makes a great sacrifice, falls, and then becomes the hero. Now in the Bible, Jesus, the prototypical hero, is born. We see his life till he's 12. Then, like any good comic book, we jump ahead to when he's an adult and ready to fight crime. The crime he fights specifically is sin. Fights that crime for 3 years. Then makes a huge sacrifice. And he is rewarded for his sacrifice by becoming the hero he was always meant to be. Shakespeare borrowed from that. The Lion King borrows from that. Like you see that over and over again. But there's a reason we like seeing that story. It's because we like seeing the characters and the characterizations of who comes through that. Look, personalized movies and things are great. They're great. They're cool. Fine. It'd be cool to say, I want a rom-com with Matthew McConaughey and Gerard Butler. Just to see it. I just would be curious how that would go. But it wouldn't mesmerize me. I wouldn't be fulfilled from it. And that's really where the people who say that actors and writers are striking themselves out of a job, they miss the boat. Actors and writers are not striking themselves out of a job. They're simply striking themselves for a fair pay amount. And once the strike is over, actors and writers will all happily go back to what they're doing and what they do best, which is giving us all a break from the humdrum every day of our lives and giving us all stories to talk about and characters to ship for those in the online community. Little creepy that there's so many ships, but I'm not mad. Actors and writers, don't fear striking yourselves out of a job. it is your negotiating tool. But at some point, you do need to return to the table and negotiate. And as a proud actor and as a proud member of SAG-AFTRA, when we return to the table, I will be excited for a fair deal. A fair deal. Not any deal. A fair deal. That gets us back to work. If that made sense, drop me a follow. If it didn't make sense, don't drop me a follow. But like the video. Comment. Let me know what you think. Random YouTube commenters have actually said that they were glad they stumbled onto my video. May I stumble onto your feed right when you need this video. I don't know why you'd need it, but I hope to be there soon. I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. Have a great day.